Let's talk about My Chemical Romance's scrapped but later released album, Conventional Weapons. Now, this one is very unique because they were up against this impossible task of trying to create a follow-up album to The Black Parade. The Black Parade is a legacy album. That's a once-in-a-lifetime creation that cannot be replicated. So how are they going to go about making their next album? Gerard also did not foresee a future past The Black Parade. So to fully understand Conventional Weapons and what happened, we can't analyze it like we would one of their concept albums. We have to look at the history and timeline of the band to fully understand it. So let's head to the fridge. As always, if you want to see the PowerPoint in greater detail, the link is in my bio. One of the main sources for this is an entire chapter in Not the Life It Seems by Tom Bryant, which focuses on what was going on during Conventional Weapons, and the interview he did with the band during this time is linked in the PowerPoint. When it came to the premise of Conventional Weapons, it was all no concept, no costumes. Or as Gerard said, I spewed out a bunch of those rules. There's going to be no concept was the first. There would be no interesting song titles, although I think I said pretentious rather than interesting. I was starting to damn anything we'd done in the past. There was going to be no costume, no pageantry, none of that. I think I was confused. I thought that rejecting everything would help us move forward. They were trying to do the exact opposite with Black Parade and go back to their more Bullet Days roots. And why was it scrapped if it's such a good album? Well, when they finished recording the full thing, but it was during the mixing process they couldn't find a way for the songs to be cohesive. Gerard couldn't find their voice or message, didn't believe in an album after Black Parade. And Gerard said, that's exactly what it was. I didn't know what was next. I lost my voice and my confidence. I didn't know what I was trying to say anymore. Let's just back it up and go through the timeline so we can better understand how they got to that point. So end of January, beginning of February, we got to hear the first snippets of songs that would end up on Conventional Weapons, and that was The World is Ugly demo. If you haven't heard this song, please go listen to it. It's going to absolutely devastate you, and I have done a deep dive on this song. So they first played it in China, Indonesia, and then they played it 2 nights in Brazil. It just wouldn't be me if I didn't bring everything back to the Madison Square Garden show, because as you know, that was the show Gerard ended by saying, if we never play another show again, keep yourself alive. And here's a few quotes from this book of the band discussing that show. So Gerard said, Ray said to me, maybe you need a break. Maybe you need to go and get some stuff out of your system. I remember saying that night, if we never do this again, thank you. What's scary is that it felt like it was okay to say that. It felt accurate. Mikey said the Madison Square Garden show really felt like it was the closing credits. It was weird. It felt like it might have been the end. So they come out with Black Parade. They spend 2 years, world tour, nonstop. They do the Black Parade is Dead, and then they do this final show at Madison Square Garden. That was their dream, the epitome, the height of their career. And they were like, okay, I think that's it. We're done. Now that show took place at the end of May in 2008, and then the band did not get back together in person until Ray Torro's wedding, which was in November of 2008. And then what happens the day after the wedding? They get together with their manager, Brian, and then they fire him. Now, I've done a whole video on Brian Schechter, and there's even a link to his podcast interview where he talks about this in detail. They are on good terms. He still works with the band, and he even admits he should have fought harder to stay with them because he was always so fiercely protective of them. The band ended their break and got back together again in February 2009 to record for the first time since Black Parade, and that was a cover of Desolation Row for the Watchmen movie. June 2009 is when they all officially get back together in the studio to work on the next album. Now, one thing about June 2009, Gerard and Lindsay just had their first kid only a few weeks prior. And Gerard had even said, they just wanted to get this album over with so that he could go back home to his family. Summer of 2009, the 2 Surprise Roxy shows was the first time they were performing since the Madison Square Garden show over a year ago. At these shows, they premiered Kiss the Ring, The Drugs, and Death Before Disco, which later on became the song Party Poison. They were actually really excited that these songs received such great attention because the band at the time just really wasn't feeling these songs they had been recording. To help them get out of the funk they've been in, just completely stuck on this record, Gerard and Lindsay did a little family retreat in the desert back in January of 2009. And that was where Gerard had an epiphany, a vision. He said, I always imagined that this record took place in the desert, but it didn't sound like it for some reason. While I was there, I wrote a song called Na 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 Na, and I realized that's what I wanted. I was writing all these crazy lyrics, and they were fearless and reckless, and I had this vision in my head, and everything I'd been working on in the comics, the masks, the laser guns, the cars, everything started to swirl around in my head. Not to mention the Final Fantasy Safe and Sound song Gerard was featured on definitely impacted and influenced all of the Danger Days. I mean, this is where Gerard fell in love with Trans Am and was asking everybody on Twitter, where can I find one of these cars? It was during that retreat, Lindsay turned to Gerard and was like, you're an artist. You're not just a musician. Look at what you did on the Black Parade. And that was a very eye-opening moment for Gerard. When they were stuck in that mixing phase, Ray says Gerard was very vocal about the fact that it just didn't feel right. He kept calling me saying, something's off here. Frank said they weren't bad songs. They just didn't have that greatness. Everyone we played it to loved it, but we didn't, and that was the problem. Mikey says it was very strange. We were wondering if we were crazy. It was like getting married to someone who everyone thinks is great, and you're thinking, yeah, but you don't know her. They replaced their producer with Rob Cavallo, who they had worked with on the Black Parade, and that's when they decided to just re-record the album. Gerard said this album started as a love letter to rock and roll, and it turned into a nail bomb. When we realized we were going to re-record the album, I turned to Mikey and said one thing: Danger Days, here we come again. I had put all of this together the day before Thanksgiving and didn't get a chance to record it. And then the news broke. But this is still a very important part of conventional weapons and the history and what happened. And that is Bob leaving the band. So it was announced around March 10th that Bob parted ways, but he actually left around February. Rob Cavallo basically felt like he was holding them back. And the band officially announced, as of 4 weeks ago, My Chemical Romance and Bob parted ways. This was a painful decision for all of us to make. It was not taken lightly. We wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors and expect you all to do the same. And then, of course, in 2015, Bob tweeted, it's been 5 years since I was kicked out of my chem, and yeah. And then November 19th, 2010, they released Danger Days. They had 5 songs originally from Conventional Weapons that made it to the album, and that, is Na 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 Na, Bulletproof Heart, Only Hope for Me Is You, Party Poison, Save Yourself, I'll Hold Them Back, which, funny enough, was almost the original title for Conventional Weapons. As I said, it was later released. So it was actually Frank who made a blog post October 30th, 2012, saying that they're going to be releasing 2 songs a month for 5 months, 10 songs in total from the Conventional Weapons sessions we did back in 2009. We hope you enjoyed these time capsules, and they may shed a little more light on how and where Danger Days came from, and maybe even where the future of MCR might be heading. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and now it's finally time to lift the veil on Conventional Weapons. And the last one of these records was released in February of 2013. A month before the breakup. So it was originally like $45 for the full set of all the records, and it also came with a box and a poster, or you could order each of them separately. I very much regret not getting that box set when it came out because Conventional Weapons is one of my favorites, although I do have one that I found on eBay for $40 back in the day, and of course it is arguably one of the saddest ones with Light Behind Your Eyes and The World Is Ugly. For me, Conventional Weapons marks a major shift in the band and its history. They let go of their manager, who was their big protector. They let go of Bob, who we now know was going through some really hard times when all of this was happening. Personally, I always felt like they should have just gone on with Conventional Weapons, not focused on the pressure of a follow-up album for Black Parade, but just did something fun where it didn't have to be a concept album, just something they could play a few small local shows and enjoy themselves again and find the fun in being a band. And who knows, things might have turned out differently if they did. But I'm grateful they at least released this years later, although they need to re-release it on CD and more formats.